Brooke Vallaly is a Greenville, North Carolina native, how about that, and a graduate of East Carolina University with a Bachelor of Arts degree in Communications. She has experience in marketing, media, healthcare, and in the nonprofit sector. Brooke was recognized as the Greenville-Pitt County Chamber Ambassador of the Year while she was the marketing manager at the Daily Reflector in Greenville. She also served as membership executive for the Girl Scouts of North Carolina Coastal Pines. Currently, as program manager with the Alzheimer's Association Eastern North Carolina chapter, Brooke oversees the chapter's volunteer-powered delivery strategy, develops community partnerships, and works to increase awareness and education of Alzheimer's and other related dementias throughout the state. Brooke also serves on the New Hanover County Advisory Council to address disparities in hospice and palliative care access for the county's most vulnerable populations, and is the Education Committee Chair of Dementia Partners Coalition. And when she's not working, which doesn't sound like much time, she lives in Wilmington with her husband and her daughter and enjoys spending time at the beach, going to concerts, and tailgating for ECU sports. Go Pirates. Please give a warm welcome to Brooke.
Great. Everyone can hear me okay? Good. Thanks for the introduction, Connie. I was here back in September, and we were talking about brain health. That topic can be a little bit more fun than this topic can be, but I'm here to bring you the information that you need for navigating or understanding a dementia diagnosis. Obviously, something like that is scary, life-changing. What does this mean for me? What does this mean for my family? How do I plan for the future? How am I going to be able to age in place in my wonderful new home that I have here? Where can I get the help that I need? So this is kind of a high level one. It's not necessarily specific, although I will bring in some resources specific to the area on navigating a dementia diagnosis. And I'm going to start the program with a video to go ahead and get us started. We'll have a lot of videos hearing from people living with Alzheimer's or another type of dementia throughout the program, and then we'll save our questions for the end.
I met Jose when we were both in the United States Army. Actually, I was a first lieutenant in the Army Nurse Corps.
Wow, she was beautiful. And she is beautiful. She is a beautiful person inside and outside. And I just said that this is the one right here. This is the one.
Jose asked me to marry him 4 months into knowing him. He deployed to Somalia, Africa for a year while I planned the wedding. And then he came back just in time for us to get married. The first glaring sign was in September of 2013, which would have been our 20th wedding anniversary. And the day came and went without any awareness of the date. And Jose doesn't forget anniversaries. He doesn't forget special occasions at all. We attribute it to being overworked and exhaustion and a heavy schedule. And then 2014 came, and he forgot the next anniversary. And I said, there's something not right. He'd had PET scans, he'd had MRIs, and he'd had CTs, but it was the amyloid PET scan that was the confirmation. When the final diagnosis of Alzheimer's was given, the emotions were overwhelming. My hope became fragile at best.
I felt that I had let my family down. I felt like that I allowed myself to go down in some way, and just sadness.
When I first reached out to the Alzheimer's Association, I needed an uncomplicated lifeline. They made it as easy and gentle as they possibly could. And receiving us into a support group. It was kind, it was professional, it was filled with information, and that's what I needed.
Being engaged with the Alzheimer's Association has worked out well for us.
When we were at the Walk to End Alzheimer's, it was so encouraging. It's very positive, and you're just out there and you're trying to get a message out.
I really enjoy going to the program, and it makes me feel better. The people who I'm there with are with Alzheimer's, and so we all have a bond.
I had done my own research with the Alzheimer's Association, and it was a really good website that we were able to use in order to get a better understanding of what Alzheimer's was.
But most of our resources have come from the Alzheimer's Association. And so the pamphlets and the education.
I've called the Alzheimer's Association. The 24/7 helpline, our children know that if they see a behavior, if I'm not around, that they can call that helpline 24/7. It's that secret safety net that exists that you always know is available. I believe that in life, you either pay up front or you pay on the back end. And Jose paid into this marriage up front, and it is my honor. It is my absolute honor to care for him.
Well, every day you wake up, you want hope. And so I stick with that and move forward.
The Alzheimer's Association helped us to see this disease differently. It helped us to see it with hope, to see it with possibility. And it made me see that there is the reality of living with Alzheimer's disease.
So that was a little bit of propaganda, but I do like the messaging that they did. And I did forget at the beginning to pass around a sign-in sheet. If you all don't mind signing in your names, I don't need any contact information unless you like. All of those resources that they mentioned for free, the 24/7 helpline where you can speak to someone in multiple languages day or night, have free education programs. They are because of our donor dollars. So for internal purposes and our grants and in reporting to our board, we want to see where we're doing programs at, how many people we're serving in each county, and report out that way. So again, no need to provide your contact information, just the names for that one. Sorry, I just passed those around. So the learning objectives, understanding the disease, dementia, and the diagnostic process, know the important things to plan, and some effective strategies for coping with day-to-day challenges. So to start with that, we've got to talk a little bit about memory loss. We're all going to age. Nobody is as sharp as they were when they were 18, I can tell you that. I'm not, none of us are. Our brains and our bodies are going to age over time and slow down, but intelligence remains stable. We're going to be less physically or mobile active and mentally flexible, and we may take some more time to process information. We may see somebody in the grocery store and we know that person, but we can't quite remember their name, and a few hours later when we get home, oh yes, that's right, I know who that is. That is normal aging to be able, that we will all experience. What's next is mild cognitive impairment, also known as MCI, and that's kind of a new term that we're hearing a little bit more about, but has always been there. And that's an early stage of memory loss or cognitive ability, really related to language, maybe spatial or visual perception. They're severe enough to be noticed by other people, but not severe enough to not be able to live on your own, to age in place. You might need some more reminders around the house. The holidays are coming up. I feel overwhelmed with all the things that I need to remember. I have more reminders on my phone and calendar invites and sticky notes. But these are things where, yes, you've got some challenges. Yes, there's some impairment, but you're still able to live your daily life. And about a third of the people that are diagnosed with mild cognitive impairment will go on to develop dementia within 5 years. So it doesn't necessarily mean a diagnosis. And dementia is that umbrella term for the symptoms that we see on the outside. The recent memory, the language, the visual and spatial function, executive function. So that's the ability to learn and recall information. Not like we didn't see somebody at the grocery store, but always needing to ask questions again, not remembering things in that short-term aspect. Maybe forgetting our writing and speaking or some of the communication skills that are going on. The ability to speak and understand symbols, maps, be able to judge correctly the distance from here to the stop sign. And really the ability to plan, reason, solve problems, maybe focus on a task. And these are all part of abnormal brain changes. Alzheimer's is that, dementia is that umbrella term, and then Alzheimer's is the most common type of dementia, which accounts for about 60 to 80% of total cases. So what is Alzheimer's? Well, we do know that it's a brain disease impacting memory, thinking, and behavior, and symptoms eventually do become severe enough to interfere with daily tasks. So the average lifetime after a diagnosis is 4 to 8 years, but it's not uncommon for it to be up to 20 years, depending on what other chronic conditions are going on or what other health problems may exist. And, excuse me, and we all, oh, I skipped ahead a little bit, but that's okay because there's not, this kind of goes right in there a little bit. So again, we really are thinking about that short-term memory loss, which is the first, oh no. We might be on a little bit of a timer with this PowerPoint, and I apologize if that happens. I'll keep an eye on that. But we've really kind of redefined Alzheimer's disease as a continuum, being asymptomatic. No cognitive symptoms, but possible biological changes in the brain. And this is really happening in our 30s and our 50s. We've kind of identified plaques and tangles, which we believe is the culprit for what's causing Alzheimer's and dementia. But we may not have any outward symptoms at the moment, but that doesn't mean that there cannot be changes that are happening in the brain. And then we've talked about MCI, the mild cognitive impairment, and these are when those first early symptoms begin to appear. And we really are concentrated at that point of that short-term memory loss. That's where people really kind of seem to notice when you have to repeat things often or ask questions a lot. Then we get into the different stages. Mild or early, moderate, middle, severe, and last stage. And these are really based on the severity that they interfere with your daily task. Most people living with mild dementia or early stage are still able to stay at home, and even through the moderate stage, it can be difficult for a caregiver. You may need additional services and help with that, and it will get worse as the disease progresses. But those are the stages, and that's how we kind of define them. And there's really no check these 5 things, and then check these 5 things, and then these 5 things, and that's when you know that you're in those stages. They will flow. Some days will be better than the other. And most caregivers say that the middle stage is the hardest or the most difficult to be able to have, because there are so many changes going on with memory, with functioning, maybe needing to hire and help to help with daily tasks for hygiene, or not being able to leave a person at home might start to really see those changes in behavior and thinking skills. And then severe is towards the end of life. But again, we kind of categorize those based on the impact on the severity of the daily life. So we're going to jump into a video, and this one is from Alan, and he started noticing some changes in his function and some of the things that he typically did with his job. And so those warning signs can often involve difficulty doing a task that used to come very easily. Sometimes the person may notice them first and be aware of it. Sometimes they may notice it and be aware of it and not be willing to talk about it and just dismiss it. But often others around them may see some of these changes first and want to have a conversation with the person.
We live in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania now. We moved out there from the West Coast My wife and I were both employed by the airlines, Pacific Southwest Airlines, and then U.S. Air, and we moved out to Pittsburgh in '93. And as far as the diagnosis goes, I had been a pilot for 30 years for U.S. Airways, and was going through an international training course to fly internationally, and I'd made a couple of crossings of the Atlantic, and was having some problems. So it's calculating simple things like fuel burns. I mean, not to get technical, but you launch across the ocean, you really need to know your fuel situation, and you have checkpoints that predicated fuel burns all the way across, and every so many degrees of latitude you add it up and make sure that your burn is at or better than what you need to keep going. It's simple math, that just adding and subtracting, and I was having trouble getting the right answers. I was making mistakes, general math, and having some memory problems. There's a lot of chatter on the radio, and a lot of it comes in really fast, and we used to joke around that you could read a newspaper, tell a joke, and not miss a radio call, because you could multitask, and I wasn't having problems reading back clearances, and one thing led to another, and I went back for a check ride and failed the check ride.
Without being a pilot, of course, I don't know what any of those things are, but as they are related to being able to do your job. Well, one, that's a pilot, so that is extra scary, so I'm glad that they do those testings in there. Go back. Sorry. But he was willing to be able to talk about some of the early detection that was in there. So we want to pay attention to those changes that are in there. And we do have a worksheet called 10 Steps to Approaching Memory Concerns. There's some timer that keeps going on this, so I apologize. But if you are the person that is noticing these changes in someone else, a good recommendation is to keep a little notebook. This is going to be fun, right? Keep a little notebook. What are you seeing? What is the time of day that you're seeing it? So that way, when the person who may not remember that they've done something, you can be able to talk to them about it. And you might have to be able to go to the doctor about it. There may be opportunities with early detection for medical ones, like the opportunity to participate in a clinical trial or prioritize your health. This is going to be great. I'm so sorry about this. I'm not sure how it's on a timing, but we'll keep an eye on it. There we go. They're each. Sorry, they were coming up on the screen a little bit quicker. So when we do think that we may have some of these concerns and we want to be able to go to see a doctor, some of these evaluating memory and thinking problems, these are what to expect. And there are going to be a lot of them: medical history, physical exam, screen for depression, interview with a close companion, which is why we want to keep that notebook if we have some concerns about somebody. Some of the tests that may include laboratory tests, mental cognitive status tests. So those may be some of the things where you do the mini cog and you draw the clock and you have to remember some words at the appointment. There's brain imaging, and there's CSF analysis, which is a big one for that one to be able to have. And all of those, there are the PET scans, the CT scans, the MRI status, and a whole bunch of them, and a lot of new ones around what we call the amyloid PET scan, which kind of pinpoints what we're looking for in the brain, the presence of amyloids, to really be able to capture, is there an Alzheimer's diagnosis there? However, not everybody has access to those. They may or may not be something, and depending on how far along you've come, you could have possibly come in this disease, They may not do those. But all of these assessments are big, and there are some, and it depends on whether you'll see your primary care physician, you might get referred to a neurologist. Lots of people locally will try to go to be able to see Mars, and that's a couple hours process. They'll also want to do an intense family history, because we know family history and genetics plays a part in there as well too. So it's an ongoing process, and it can take several weeks, several months, and depending on where you live in some rural areas, could take even longer for that. And all of these resources or things that I'm talking about, I am providing kind of a link where you can kind of go in and learn more about each of the type of tests afterwards, so you can kind of get some more information for yourself. So moving into, we've gone through all of this, and we do have a diagnosis. So we're talking about principles for a dignified diagnosis, and this is some of the materials that are on the back too. And this is the first statement of its kind written by people actually living with dementia. In 2008, we held a nationwide town hall for people that were in the early stages, the medical community, and they helped us identify some of the diagnostic challenges and dissatisfying interactions that may occur throughout the journey or with the medical community as you manage this disease. And these are their insights that they share with you or with caregivers to be able to make this process or this experience better. One of the examples, and we can see on here, talk to me directly, the person living with dementia. Don't want to sit in the doctor's office and the person talks to your husband or wife beside you like you're not the one getting diagnosed, and hearing things that are in there. Another one, even if you don't have all the answers, tell me what you do know. Tell me what I can expect going forward. Please use language that I can understand. I mean, we've all been to a doctor's appointment, and the words are over our head. The diagnosis is over our head. Tell me in a way that I can understand, that my family can understand. Tell the truth. Take my concerns seriously, regardless of my age. Deliver the news in plain but sensitive language, and then big one, coordinate with other care providers. Once you have a diagnosis, you probably have multiple doctors, multiple services, and trying to manage and keep up with that is a lot, especially when we're talking about different medications. So if we can get your medical team to communicate together and really develop that care team, that's when you'll have a much stronger experience and a much stronger care journey. Still going on to the principles, explain why you want me to go and have this test. What do you hope to learn for it? If we already think that it's Alzheimer's, or you've already seen something off of some basic testing, why do I need to go for a PET scan? Why do I need to go for an MRI? Give me some tools for living with this disease. That's a big one. We do a lot of these town halls, and that's a lot of the feedback that we hear, is that I'm given this diagnosis and kind of, here you go. Not a list of local resources, support groups, free services that are in the area, education about the disease and what to expect. And some of the other ones recognize that I am an individual, and the way that we're going to experience the disease is unique. People are going to progress at faster rates. People are going to have different attitudes and acceptance of the diagnosis. And so being able to relate to that person as an individual rather than a blanket statement of, well, this is how it is for everybody. We're going to get into another video, and this is Susan, who's been an RN all of her life, and she's living with Alzheimer's, so she's going to share what her experience was with the diagnostic process.
I went to my family doctor of many years. He knew me as a patient, and he also knew me as a nurse because I was assigned to some of his patients and stuff. So he knew that I was a type A personality, and I always had to have things just in order and stuff. So for me not to be keeping things in order was not me. So he did a CAT scan, then he did an MRI. And he told me his mother was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. And he told me when I did the MRI, he said, there's one of three things that's showing up on this MRI. He says it's either MS and you don't have any muscle weakness, or it's Parkinson and you're not having any kind of shakes. So it has to be Alzheimer's. So he started me on some medicine, and I went along like that for about a year, saying on good days I'd say, no, I really don't have Alzheimer's. And on bad days I'd say, oh yeah, I do. So after about a year, I went to a specialist in Monroe and stuff, and I said, I really need to know, do I or don't I? And he diagnosed me with vascular dementia and Alzheimer's at that time. And he's been my doctor since.
We did include in that handout that you can have afterwards the different types of dementia. Like I said, Alzheimer's is the most common. The second most common one now is that vascular dementia, and that is really related to our lifestyle. Vascular dementia means heart. Every time your heart pumps, it feeds 20 to 25% of the blood, oxygen, and nutrients to your brain. So simple math, if the heart isn't at 100%, then the amount of nourishment that your brain is going to receive, things like heart attacks, traumatic brain injuries, strokes, all of those can increase the risk of having vascular dementia. So now, again, we still are continuing with living with the diagnosis. How does it feel? I mean, I hate to use the plain word, but it sucks. It's life-changing. We're angry. We're scared. We're frustrated. But we may even also have a little sense of relief because we've noticed some things that are going on, and at least now we have an answer and we're not in the unknown anymore. Might feel lonely or embarrassed. All of those things that you can feel, and feel them because you have to. So when we're moving into that, that's definitely going to change our expectations. We bought this huge, beautiful house in St. James Plantation. We're going to be on the boat in Southport. We're going to spend July 4th and have all the fun at the parade here. And we're traveling abroad. And this diagnosis is going to mean some changes and some different varying of acceptance and what could that possibly look like. So I'm sure that when you bought that house, you didn't have that diagnosis in mind that this could happen at all. But it's important to chart a new territory as much as you can. And we're not all glass half full people. My brother has stage 4 bladder cancer, and he is the glass half full type. He makes jokes about not needing to wait in line for the bathroom anymore. But not everybody can have that attitude, and it's going to be able to take some time to be able to move to that acceptance. But your activities, your hobbies, your aging at home, all of that can still continue with kind of understanding what may be out there as far as services and what the journey could look like as well too. So the person that's been diagnosed and their caregivers and care partners likely to have a lot of anxiety and depression about the diagnosis. Loss of interest in activities. You might see someone that's a great volunteer with St. James Nest playing golf daily or twice a day at one of your many golf courses, and now we don't see them as much anymore. Pulling back from the things that you love is another big sign that could come even before a diagnosis, because you're worried about, how do I remember the rules of the game? Not that I know any rules for the golf to be able to do that, but will I need a putter or a driver? Do I need to be able to am I still going to be able to drive the golf cart? All of those things can be a symptom and that you may be able to pull back. So it can take some time to realize that you can still do some of these things and with some modifications. And then the big thing is dealing with stigma, and especially that I think only recently in the past several years have we begun to talk about brain health and Alzheimer's and dementia. November is actually Alzheimer's Awareness Month and National Family Caregivers Month. Before, it could kind of be a buryment. We didn't ask for any help. We didn't have any services. We may stay at home and completely withdraw. And I did want to share this. The last time I was here, and you're welcome to look through it at the end, and I was gifted an Amazon gift card. I bought a couple copies of these, which is The Day After Yesterday, and it's a portrait of people that are living with dementia. One of them is Jay Reinstein. He was the assistant city manager for Fayetteville for many years and started noticing some issues while he was on the job. And he has early onset, and he is busier now than he ever was as an advocate. Last year, he won the National Advocate for the Year for the association. So there are things like this, and there are people that are living with dementia and Alzheimer's that want to share their story to help people realize that it does not have to be this check the box, close the door, we're done, we're staying home, that there is still some life with this diagnosis. And those are the things that can begin to change the stigma on being able to have that diagnosis. And then next video, got lots of videos because who better to hear from than people that are living with Alzheimer's, is Justine. She's 75 years old. So she talks a lot about the stigmas that she experienced and some of the things that she's doing to kind of change that within her community.
I think people don't know enough about the disease, and there should be more awareness going on, and I try and do that every chance I get. And with our radio show, I have people come on, I have doctors come on and all and talk about Alzheimer's just to try and get awareness, because there are too many people that still see that as a disgraceful disease, you know, and keep grandma hidden away and those kind of things. So what I try and do is get it more out in the opening and help people feel comfortable talking about it. And my mother belonged to a senior center when she was alive, and I always did programs there for people. And so I still do programs there sometime and help talk to them about my Alzheimer's. So, you know, if they have the disease, they can feel more comfortable with it. Because you can, you know, it's about living with Alzheimer's. Yeah, so that's what I try and get that point over to people.
That education piece is really important. I mean, I skipped that one myself. That education piece is really important because we still have a conception that this is a mental illness, not that it's a brain disease, especially when we may see those really difficult or challenging behaviors or personalities. Grandma, you know, growing up in the South, that she baked all the cakes for church and always won all of the contests and everything, and now all of a sudden we hear four-letter words coming out of her mouth. Those big 180-degree changes are really difficult for people to wrap their head around, that what is happening is within the brain. And the brain, we're not letting people in and check it out and see what's happening. Just like the brain determines our personality, left brain, right brain, artistic people, data people, all of these changes are happening when you have the diagnosis, and we don't necessarily know which parts of the brain are being infected first. Typically, memory and communication are those early symptoms, but as the disease progresses, we will see those changes in personality and behavior and decision-making and things like that, and especially when they're very different from the person that you know, those can be really hard to be able to explain around within yourself and the community and your care partners. So moving into partnering with your doctor, it's really important. It's going to take time. And again, there may be several doctors that you have to be able to work with. But here are some suggestions that people living with Alzheimer's have been able to share with us. So preparing for the visit, make a list of questions. Make all of the list of questions that you have. Ask for extra time at the doctor's appointment, especially early on. Nothing worse than thinking that you're going in there for something routine and you really wanted to talk to them about some memory concerns, and now all of a sudden the doctor's like, well, you were a 15-minute appointment that I had. I don't have time for all of this. So let them know ahead of time to be able to give you some more time. Take all those questions. Take family members or friends. I know that can be difficult, but we want somebody else to be able to help write questions down, ask questions, and help us remember the information. Write down all the changes that you've seen or your loved one's seen. List all medications, vitamins, and supplements. And this is really big because although at this point we've kind of had that diagnosis, there are a lot of things that can happen that doesn't necessarily mean Alzheimer's and dementia. There's a lot of side effects to different medications. There's a lot of interactions with some of the vitamins and supplements, especially with cancer drugs and blood thinning medications. So you want to be able to take all of those and scheduling those appointments at a time when you feel best. A lot of people will incur sundowning. When the sun goes down, the behavior, the challenging behaviors, the communication, the agitation, this will all go up when the sun goes down. So trying to find those times in the morning where you have time to be able to get up, or lunchtime after you've eaten, whatever those appointments are when you feel your best. And at the doctor appointment, being open and honest, asking the questions, asking about medications and treatments. I love this next one. Ask until you understand. We might be in there all day if it were me that were in there doing that, but that's your appointment. This is your journey. This is your health. Ask until you understand. Take notes or bring someone that can. And then a big one is making sure you wear your glasses and your hearing aids if you do have those as well too, because that can, of course, impact the appointment as well too. So the next video, we've got Dutton, who's going to talk a little bit about his experience on getting medical care.
I advocate that first you find an organization that's very skilled and knowledgeable. I probably shouldn't say this, but I don't think your family doctor is the place to go. I would go to a center or a group that specializes in this diagnosis. I'm one who believes you function better in life if you have information, and therefore I want to know, even though it may be disappointing news, I want to know that news so I can plan my life. And I think you will be better off if you go and you learn what is your reality, and then you can plan the rest of your life and make the most of what you got. You might still be able to go to Europe or wherever, even though you have a diagnosis, and enjoy life. And I think with information, you can do that and go for it.
Well, he's right. You can still travel with that. Perfect timing for the one coming up in January. But one of the things I want to point out that he mentioned, the preference of seeing a specialist. And I heard something a couple weeks ago that basically said neurologists can write their own paycheck. They are in such need across the country, and especially in rural areas like coastal and southern North Carolina. It's kind of a public health crisis. With the expected projection of people that will have Alzheimer's or dementia, there are not enough specialists, direct care workers, social workers that have that specific knowledge in geriatrics or gerontology to be able to best help someone. And in fact, we've had some initial surveys done, and in talking with primary care physicians, only about 40% of them say that they feel comfortable in giving a diagnosis of MCI or Alzheimer's. So what do? They refer you to a neurologist. I live in Wilmington. I know there's a shortage to be able to go and see a neurologist, or a long wait to be able to go into Mars. So I point that out because his video is correct. I mean, one, if you do want the information, that's great. And two, the specialist is ideal, but we're in a challenging time where that may not be feasible, or at least feasible early enough. One of the reasons we talk about that are some of the FDA-approved treatments. So we kind of categorize them in 2 degrees. One is the ones to be able to treat symptoms. So this is related to memory and thinking. They can't stop or slow the damage that's occurring in the brain. And they can lessen or stabilize some of the symptoms for a limited time by affecting some of the chemicals that are in the brain. A lot of the things that we have, mood stabilizers, some of those challenging behaviors, not being able to sleep or reversing your day and your night, all of those are some of these drugs that treat some of the symptoms. And of course, there are all of those standard side effects that when they show a commercial on TV, it's like, why would you even take this drug? Because there's 50 very scary side effects that are given, but they have to list everything that's on there. And again, it's focusing on treating the symptoms. And if we're thinking about aging in home and we have a caregiver, or we want to be able to comfortably have someone come and provide respite care, those are all the things that can help. There are some things that are happening a little bit for changes that affect the brain, and they are meant for the early stage, and that's aducanumab and lecanemab. There are more drugs that are coming down in the pipeline. Lecanemab is the newest one and the best one that's happening, and they treat MCI and early on Alzheimer's. Once we've really progressed in that disease, we're not able to take those. And those are the ones that you have to have that confirmation of the beta amyloid that's in your brain. So that's where the CT, the PET scans, the MRIs come into. There are some side effects that are happening with those. And again, like the scary commercials that are on there, they're not happening to everybody, but it can cause something called ARIA, which is swelling in other parts of your brain that may not be affected. For example, if memory or communication is the prominent symptom, you may have swelling in the brain that changes decision-making or mobility, things like that that can be affected. Realistically, we're really far away from that being something that we're going to see at a level, especially at a level in rural North Carolina. If we remember back in the 1980s when cancer drugs chemotherapy was first introduced, and it was an IV, and you traveled and you went to the chemotherapy center and you got it intravenously, that's the level that we're at right now. Then there comes a lot of training for hospitals and for people to be able to diagnose this. Then we've got insurance for those same doctors and hospitals to be able to administer it. Right now, it does lower the beta amyloid that's in your brain and preserve some of that cognitive function and functional decline at about 37%. So what that can look like if we take that 4 to 8 diagnosis is about 4 to 10 months more time in this MCI or this early stage. It's a very expensive drug, but we have, like any new drugs that are coming out there, we've got to be able to start somewhere. And so the first drug comes and things continuously get better. We always want to talk about treatments that work in varying degrees, just like being able to take something over the counter. Somebody may prefer Aleve, somebody else prefers Advil. You may get different symptoms like nausea from one medication to another. So we're going to have this throughout being able to adjust our medication to where it really be able to help support those symptoms that are in there. So now we talk about telling others about your diagnosis. Definitely a scary subject to be able to have. Who do you tell? It's up to you. It's your decision. It's your family's decision. You might think a little bit like Jay, well, I'll tell everyone. I'm not ashamed. I'll become an advocate. Very few foreign people have that attitude and can have that kind of mindset or outlook for that. You may think, I don't want to be treated differently on the golf course, so I'm not going to say anything until I have to. You don't want to tell anybody that's in there. So how will they react? You don't know any of these things, but the stress of being able to hide your symptoms or the stress of being able to pull back from social activities can cause more harm than good, because those are all of the things that we need and that bring us joy. So if and when you do decide to tell your diagnosis, you may want to make a list. You don't have to post it on Facebook and say, I have Alzheimer's. That's not what we're asking you to do. You might want to have some one-on-one conversations with those really important people. Your children, your spouse would likely know, maybe some siblings. any sort of doctors or other appointments that you may be going to that they would need to be able to know. You may not want to tell them. You may give your care partner or your spouse the permission to tell people as needed. You might write a letter and share some of the symptoms that you're experiencing. When we think about families coming to visit for the holidays, you might want to they may know what a diagnosis is, but maybe they haven't had the education or the understanding of what the symptoms are. You might want to tell them these are some of the things that Dad is having challenges with. And what challenges can you anticipate? I mean, nobody has a crystal ball, we don't know. But I do know that if you don't give people the opportunity to react, then they're not going to react. It's like being reluctant to ask for help. People don't know what you need help with, so they often don't offer anything because they don't know. So you may want to be able to be specific. You might want to say, these are the things I can do, these are the things that I need help with. You can't control people's emotions, and just like you may have gone through a little bit of a grieving process with the diagnosis, those that you choose to tell are likely to go through that too and may need some time to react, maybe bad, maybe good, maybe up and down like a roller coaster. All of those can happen. So some of the things that people living with Alzheimer's said about sharing their diagnosis was, you know, I decided to tell them when they ask me, when they recognize, something seems off or you don't quite seem yourself. I don't just go and blurt it out on Facebook. Then I'll have this conversation with them once they notice it. Your friends are your friends, hopefully. Tell them what is happening to you. You know, at first, another person that's living with Alzheimer's said, at first I tried to hide my memory problems, but when I finally told people, it was like a huge weight was lifted off because then they were able to help, and then I wasn't kind of going through this so isolated. And those isolating experiences we've all been through, COVID, where we felt so isolated, are not going to be beneficial or healthful across the board. So the next video is Susan, whose sister has been diagnosed with Alzheimer's. And she shares her thoughts about sharing, her sister sharing the diagnosis. We can wait until the end, but have some thoughts on her opinion. And again, she's not the one that's diagnosed, her sister is.
I would hope that families could be gentle but straightforward. I would hope that they wouldn't minimize the challenge of this or make it larger than it needs to be. So I guess I would say you have to be aware that changes are coming, but they're coming, you know, inch by inch and sometimes foot by foot. But most often, you just have to talk about it. Not to be afraid to talk about it, not to be worried about how to talk about it, but talk about it. Because if you don't, I think that there's going to be 1 or 2 days where you just find there are arresting moments and you have no idea where to put that or how to manage that. Not to be afraid, just to talk.
Spoken like my 8-year-old who likes to give me advice on everything, even though she hasn't experienced that. So again, I have some conflicting views on that, but I share that video because it kind of segues us into a little bit for caring for those closest relationships. I mean, raise your hand if you would not be afraid if you got a diagnosis of Alzheimer's. 2 people, 3 maybe. I work for the association and I still would be scared if I have that diagnosis. So I like her straightforwardness to be able to have that. To me, in my opinion, the part that she has right is the conversation, the communication. That needs to happen and that needs to be ongoing. So when we think about that, that's our inner circle and caring for those relationships. Those memory loss and the symptoms that you're displaying are going to be changes that affect your relationships across the board. So accepting help from others, while it's hard to do, especially for some of us type A personalities that like to do everything and know that there's a proper way to load the dishwasher, not the way my husband does that, you might need some help, and it's okay to ask for some of that. And that comes in a lot, that accepting help is a sign of strength that we don't always recognize or want to be able to admit. And those kind of connections, if you can't ask your daughter or your husband or your sister for help, that kind of speaks a lot about it, your relationship with them. But you want to be able to enjoy the time that you have and make the most of it, hopefully. And so those are some of the things that we're talking about. Are activities more or less enjoyable? If you're just getting more frustrated on the golf course, it might be something to pull back from. Maybe we need to have some Wii golf in the house and try something like that again. Are you making mistakes? Are you making those very safety type mistakes when it comes to financials or driving or things like that? Have you stopped doing something again because you don't enjoy it anymore? If you make those mistakes repeatedly, can you harm yourself or can you harm others? I saw one of the topics was medication management. That's a big thing with being able to live at home. Am I forgetting to take medication? That's going to happen with aging. Every time my mom leaves my house, she ends up calling 2 minutes later, did I leave my Friday pills on the counter? So I have to go look for those. But those are the things that we're looking at on, do you need help? Where are some areas that you can accept help? Could there be family conflict? Most likely when you had your grieving period and then you share that diagnosis and those people have other ways that they're going to react, there could be some, and very likely could be some family conflict from that. Different understanding of the disease can be a part of that. Some of the families where we share diagnosis, if someone's been in, maybe your daughter-in-law has been in, healthcare for 20 or 30 years, she might have a different outlook, and being able to kind of support you in a way that her husband that maybe has a different type of job and no background or experience with that and understanding of it, then he could do as well too. So what are some of the things that we could have family conflict with? Again, lack of understanding about the disease, denial. We came down here to St. James Plantation to live life on the boat and the beach and enjoy that July 4th parade. Tunnel vision, that's the way that I'm going. This diagnosis doesn't mean that we have to have that many changes in our day-to-day life. Emotional response to your new role. If it's your spouse and you have this grand plan, you might feel frustrated, bitter, angry that now your role could be changing as a care partner or a caregiver. For the person that's been diagnosed, like he mentioned in the first video, intense feelings of guilt. It's my fault that these plans are changing. It's my fault that we're going to have, our nest egg is going to go towards supporting me in some of the diagnosis. Not understanding how much help that you may need, especially when we want to be able to stay at home for as long as possible. And family conflict because you haven't asked anybody for help. We've all living across the United States. Maybe we're relying on one child that's living closest to us and not even bothering the other child that may be across the country. And then they're going to start to get angry because they haven't even been asked to come and do anything to help you. All of those things can contribute it. So how do you deal with those conflicting views? First thing, prioritize yourself and your wants, and of course taking consideration your partner if you're with them. Maybe having a family meeting where we can be open and honest. One of the videos that I do recommend, it's only about 28 minutes long, with the family living across the country, was that they had weekly Skype conversations with mom and stepdad so they could understand what was going on with the disease a little bit. And sometimes things were heated and people signed off, and some things they didn't, but they kept at it by having that open communication. You might want to have an in-depth care consultation with the helpline. You might want to get some help from an attorney, a clergy. You might want to be able to hire a case manager to help you through all of those things on being able to deal with conflicting views and have counseling. So those important issues to discuss, those 4 right there. My mom is 75. She's been widowed for 23 years. She does not have Alzheimer's or dementia, and I do not want to talk about any of those with her. Except for the driving. When I'm in the car with her, I definitely want to talk about the driving because she's still driving like it's back in the 60s, and she's short, and they have blocks with 2 feet. So we're always talking about that one. Nobody likes talking about those things, but you have to talk about money. You have to talk about driving. You have to talk about daily tasks. If I can't do this, this is what I want. You have to talk about living arrangements between the people. When it becomes an issue that I don't feel I can be in the home, or your caregiver, your spouse feels like they can't manage it, what's that kind of threshold? What's that level? What do you want to be able to do afterwards? So you can't get to any of those answers if you're not open and honest. No, and again, nobody wants to have those conversations. Sometimes you have to start out small with what you don't want. We're always more willing to say, okay, well, are we going for Mexican or Italian night? I don't want Mexican. You probably don't want Italian either, but you're not putting your voice out there. But sometimes figuring out what somebody doesn't want will lead you in that direction. And those conversations can start out small for that. We might have an experience with a neighbor, and your husband said, oh, I don't like sorry not to pick on you, Connie. I don't like what Connie, how they handle that. I don't want that. Well, we learn what we don't want, which is getting us in the right direction. I don't want somebody to come in my home and do these things, or I really don't want to go into a long-term care community, whatever those can be. So what do some of the people that living with Alzheimer's say? Some of the things they say are, I don't like it when they tell me they're caretakers. The word partner seems better. We help each other. I don't need a babysitter. We hear that a lot. We try to call them care partners now instead of caregivers, because it does kind of have a connotation of a babysitter. They might say, you know, by accepting help, we might have an easier road. I might have some better results. Might say, you help family out, you help friends out, you do favors when you have to. No problem there. I don't want to be totally dependent. I want to find ways that I can still contribute and be involved. So that leads us into a little bit on what I can do now. You know, really hard to accept help from others. Still haven't learned to let my husband load the dishwasher in his own way. But we definitely need to be able to try to get there as much as we can. Focus on what you can do and what you can't do, even though communication, maybe you like to be able to read a lot, and now reading can be very difficult. We might be able to move to books on tape or audio. Focus on what you can do and what solutions you might be able to have to be able to help support that. Learn what you can about the disease, and then work with those that you trust and being able to care for some of your closest relationships. We've all seen those, maybe a death in the family, where we figured out who some of our family and friends are. We might have some family and friends that are more like family than some of my actual family. I am talking about my uncle on that one, and the family friends that we have that are definitely stronger. But again, you have to ask and be able to be willing to accept help. It's kind of hard to put a blanket statement on there. Sure, we'll take some help. Write down those specifics. I need help with meals. I have a standing appointment, or I have a standing bridge time that I have with the girls, and I need somebody to come and stay home with my husband for those days. The more specific you are, the easier it is to accept some of those, to be able to plan out some of the help that you might need. And you can always share with people on how it feels to accept help. It's very challenging, especially when we're talking about a parent to a child relationship, on some of the things that you might need help with. So you might want to consider a support group or counseling. I did bring a list, but the Cape Fear Area Agency on Aging has a great list of all the different types of support groups. There's some for caregivers, some for those with early stage. There's a new memory cafe that's in the area. You want to be able to get all of your options to be able to get the help that you need. So we call that, remember, we don't want to call it a caregiver. We want to call it a care partner. So in kind of developing that care team, because when you do have this disease, it's more than you and the person living at home. It's more than you and your doctor. There are a team of people that you're going to need help from and get services from. So how can we make those decisions as family? What things can you do without help definitely, again, I'm going to harp on this, not the dishwasher. Still need help on that one. But who are those family members that you feel comfortable even asking? Where do you need help? If you're not comfortable asking maybe your spouse or family, we have formal support like a professional like geriatric case managers, or informal support like area agency on aging, clergy, other services that could provide that as well too. Tell people what you need instead of assuming that you know. I mean, ladies, how many times do we have our husbands read our minds? They don't. I'm not going to read his mind either. They don't know what you need if you just assume that they're going to know, or assume to be able to pick up on some of the symptoms. If at some point you can't stay at home, when and where do you want to go? When you allow others, what things will you allow others to help you make decisions with? If you're having trouble with driving, can we kind of come to an agreement that maybe we need some help with driving, but don't take away this activity that I can still do independently? And that's all that continuing, open, and honest communication. So some of the people with Alzheimer's say, try to feel okay about the change. I've never been a kind of roll with the punches girl. Change is difficult for me, so that try is definitely in the quotations mark for that. And try to trust others to understand what it is that you need. Being able to problem solve with others is a little bit more hopeful than being able to do it on your own. And every bit of help can help you get to your goal, which may be staying at home or aging at home as much as possible. So the next video we're going to have is Diane talking about some of the changes that her husband that's diagnosed experienced.
The big change is that Russ isn't working any longer, so we're together full time, and that was a big adjustment to make. But in addition, Russ always took care of all the finances. He took care of all of the bills. He was only too happy to do it, and I was only too happy not to do it. And I realized what a big mistake that was now. But now I really insist that we sit down together and we pay the bills together and discuss the finances. And we're going to get together with some sort of a financial advisor. We had a planner, but we need to go a little further. Because I'm really afraid. A few times the cable went off, and he's never missed paying a bill, but he missed paying the bill. And most of our banking is automatic online, but there are bills that you have to pay that can't be paid automatically. And so I really want to know. I get really frightened. I want us to go through the mail when it comes in together, because he separates it. Here's yours, here's mine, and then I hear the shredder going, and it's like, were there checks? Were there bills? What's going on? And so, and that's really hard, because, he feels inadequate if I say, I want to sit down with you and do this.
And that is something we experience across the board, whether there's a diagnosis or not. I try, but my mom does not want to do any of those automatic payments. She still wants to mail in a check, and boy, she hates any place that will not take in her check to be able to mail in. But a few times she has forgotten it, and it's been really frustrating. And then the late payment that comes along with it, to be able to have that, totally understandable. And finances, just like that money part, is a tricky one to be able to talk about. But I actually, in the neighborhood that I'm at, 2 doors down is a family that's living there. She's a little older than me. They have 3 teenage and young adult daughters, and her parents came down and moved in the house beside us. Her mom has Alzheimer's, and she actually reached out and asked me for help to be able for bill paying for her dad. He was forgetting some things. He's so focused on caring and being with his wife, he was letting things go. And he didn't want the children to be involved and do it. So I connected with one of our volunteers that is a financial planner, and we were able to get someone to be able to come out there. So you've got to be willing to kind of look outside your circle a little bit. So then we want to think about deciding and sharing our wishes. And this is, again, across the board, whether we have that diagnosis or not. Again, what do you want? What do you not want? So having all those legal and financial documents in place, they may need to change with the diagnosis. When you move from out of state to North Carolina, not every state's Living will is accepted here. All of those things that you need to be able to look into. But those 5 that they talk about, the financial durable power of attorney, who can make financial decisions for you if you can't, medical durable power of attorney, medical decisions on your behalf, a living will, a preference for medical procedures when you can't, the last will and testament, your financial affairs, your executor, state laws vary when we move from state to state, and the DNR, what emergency personnel will do. We've had a tough conversation with this between my mom and my brother and I, because the things that she wants on her medical durable power of attorney, I'm not going to be able to do that. My brother's going to have to do that, but he can't do finances. She has to have me for that. And then my aunt, who's living across the country, is the executor, because she doesn't want either one of us dealing with that either. So it can be a variety of people, backups. It doesn't even have to be family members that are in there. But again, this is where you get into that, I have this diagnosis, things are going to look different. This is what I want, this is what I don't want. And they can be really specific with those as well too. And why they're so important is because, you know, we have the diagnosis, those plans for the house, the boat, the July 4th parade, they're going to change financially. The average cost of total care for a lifetime for someone living with Alzheimer's is $380,000. It is the most expensive disease to care for. Most caregivers and families incur about twice as much out of pocket for this disease compared to another chronic disease like cancer or heart or things like Parkinson's to be able to have. So that's why you kind of have to have those conversations, because there's a lot of factors that go in there. And I'm sure that a lot of us have that guilt feeling like he talked about initially. I don't want to be a burden. I don't want to be a burden to my spouse. I don't want to be a burden to my children. So you have to have those conversations to minimize your feeling of feeling like a burden. Even though it's my mom, I don't consider myself ever being a caregiver for her because that's my mom. But again, those are some of the conversations that we have to be able to have in order to get to what she wants or not want. Because we go into insurance, retirement, savings, assets, government programs. Well, what I want is to live in that super nice place that's a couple miles down the road if I have to go to a long-term care community. But I don't think my finances can support that, so we better roll back and see what can we do. If we're a veteran and different levels of service, you're entitled to different services in that way. Sometimes you can actually pay somebody that is a caregiver so they can recoup some of their income that's being able to have there. So you've got to tap into all of those. So again, it's all about, one, having the best experience or the journey, but then that feeling of minimizing that burden because you have a plan in place that your loved ones can do. Next video is the benefits of planning early.
You know, I have all my, what we call ducks in a row. I've done my living will. I've done my regular will, advanced directives. Do it while you can still make those decisions. Do it while you could still, you know, help someone that if they're a little further advanced, if you're a caregiver, you can help know what they want. And it's sometimes people in this country today don't want to talk about death or dying or anything like that. It's a part of life. And let's make it like the circle of life. In other words, you know, death and dying is not necessarily a terrible thing. We're all going to do it. It's how we do it. And if we make our decisions properly, when we can still make good decisions, that makes a difference.
I know I'm getting close to time, so I will kind of wrap up and get through some of these, but there's a whole bunch of information that I'll share afterwards that you'll have access to on those living days to days. And a lot of this comes from our website, alz.org/IHaveAlls, and then we have a whole section about living well with the disease. So strategies for successful coping, you know, picking those activities that you enjoy at the best time. If sundowning is an issue, you know, change your holiday plans. Instead of that big dinner, maybe doing a lunch or a brunch so that the person that's diagnosed can have a more enjoyable celebration with their family. You know, try memory aid suggestion and checklist. Boy, if I don't have these everywhere. I have a, today I got caught not moving the elf on the shelf, so now I just set myself a reminder at 9 o'clock every night to move Bridget, because Bridget stayed at one spot one night, so that was in trouble. So keeping a notebook, when it comes in there, write it down so you can be able to remember it. You know, plan to follow that familiar, consistent routine. That will really help that day-to-day go the best. It will minimize those challenging behaviors as much as possible when we have that consistency or routine. Give yourself the grace of more time to do, take longer time to be able to do a task that you know you can do. Maybe, you know, those type A personalities, we were doing 10 things, maybe we need to minimize it to 2 things that we can do and do well. Do one thing at a time. So guilty of this on the regular day. Thinking about tips for a helpful environment. That sundowning, that happens a lot. We have a lot of people that will draw the shades, you know, before the sun goes down, so we can't really see inside the house those things that happen. When the sun comes down and we're in a house, maybe we have a beautiful mirror and we have you know, a glass door, all those shadows, when you have other people behind you, it looks like there are people in the room when it's just the family that's in there or whoever is in there, and that can cause some of the challenging behavior. When you have a diagnosis, your peripheral vision is severely diminished, so people coming up from the sides or behind you can startle you and then get you agitated or cause those anxieties. But there's a lot of the things that you can do to help that environment, using labels, keeping a naturally light, bright room, pulling away some of those beautiful throw rugs that can be tripping hazards, or being able to change things on the door to minimize wandering. If you put a dark mat or dark brown or black mat, that will often deter people, like in the middle stage, from wanting to go out the door because it looks like a hole that's down there. When you have a white wall and a white door and a white door handle, like maybe some of the old churches do, you can't, it's very hard to distinguish that. So all of those things that pay attention to your environment, and again, going back to that consistent routine and simplifying tasks. We'll skip this video. And wrapping up some of the coping strategies that some of the people living with Alzheimer's, you know, remembering which medications I've taken, putting a sticky note, do not take me, as a reminder that the medication, there's a lot of medication dispensers that are out there. Locating my spouse in a crowded area. You know, I never even thought of this one. I wear the same color shirt as my spouse when going out, and so that it's easier to be able to look at the color and being able to find them. Forgetting whether or not I have washed my hair when showering. This happens a lot, especially when people are living at home alone. They don't really have somebody else to have those checks and balances on them. So hygiene is a big thing that can often go to the wayside because we don't remember we haven't put on a clean shirt. So this person moved the shampoo and conditioner bottles from one side of the shower to the other so that they don't double wash their hair. Difficulty writing. My care partner assists me with writing out the checks and then I sign them. My mom has stories upon stories from when she was growing up. Do you remember this person? You knew them when you were 4.5 and they lived on the street and felt like, no, I don't remember all of that. I'm trying to get her now to use the talk to text, and then we're doing talk emails so that she can put all of these memories down. But with difficulty writing, that could be a way to be able to use our technology. Those Apple tags to be able to put on key things of your phones can help a lot. Friends shying away from me. You know, understandable, not common. You may have done this one in your life. Your best and real friends will stay with you. And then accepting changes and abilities. Some things will become more difficult, and then trying to accept those changes are out of control and focusing on what you can do, not what you can't do. If we think about that a lot with, you know, when you have a baby, well, I can't go out and do these things anymore because I have 3 kids that are with me. Well, think about what you can do. I can now go to the beach and make a great day of it and enjoy it. Kind of changing that perspective as much as you can try and have those. And then, again, we recommend staying active as much as possible. Coping with those sensory changes can be really difficult, and things like that can be those bright lights like I suggested. The holidays are coming up. It's going to be big Christmas or Hanukkah parties. Maybe that's a challenge for you, and all that room and environment and all that overstimulation is not good. So maybe you can suggest a small, intimate brunch or lunch as a way to be able to still have that. You know, piling in 8 grandkids may not be the best for sensory changes for that one as well, too. And then wrapping up just a little bit, and of course, like I did today, even though the topic is not that fun at all, still being able to interject humor where you can, aka the dishwasher. Because if you're not laughing, you're probably crying for that one a little bit. Get back. These are some of the resources that we have, that I have all's tools to help live a quality life. We're going to roll through all of those. Again, I have a PDF with all of those links to there. The Community Resource Finder is where you can plug in your zip code and be able to find different services like support groups, transportation. I mean, you all live in a great community where you're going to have those options, but not everybody does. Maybe you are the caregiver carrying long distance for somebody else back in New Jersey, and you want to be able to look for some help for them. We're going to let that one go and slide those one down. We have a ton of those resources that are on there. Chat boards or message boards for people that are diagnosed and for caregivers. But clearly, that is the end of the program on there. So I wanted to, as long as I don't trip over there, there is materials in the back, magnets for that 1-800 helpline, 24/7, multiple languages. It doesn't matter if it's supposed to be Christmas Eve. There is somebody that you can talk to at any time. And if you've got any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Thank you.
One of the main reasons I came today, some of the statistics of how many of us will get dementia and Alzheimer's is frightening. In your late 70s, late 80s, and beyond, can you give those to us? Maybe you didn't want to scare us.
I actually tried not to scare people. We have a whole video for that, and I think it is kind of, glass empty instead of glass full. But right now there's 6.7 million Americans 65 and older that are living with the disease. That's projected to go up pretty high by about 2050. When we're looking at that 6.7 million, we're looking at the majority of them, 2/3 being women. And add the fact that we're typically care partners. It's a very female-centric disease. In North Carolina, we have about over 200,000 people diagnosed. Again, this is the diagnosis. So if anybody here is a Panthers fan, which I am not, but you could fill that stadium almost 3 times. And that's as many people that we're talking about to be able to give it a perspective. Most of the information coming down, like I mentioned, that vascular dementia, is related to our lifestyle because our brain and our hearts are connected. We can't change our family history. We can't change our genetics. We can't change that it affects more women than men, but we can change things like hypertension is the #1 chronic disease that increases your risk for living with that as well too. So the numbers are projected to go up. I think by 2050, they think it could be closer to 10 million people and having that. And it changes. That's the 65 and older. Once you kind of hit that 85 age, that's where the risk may go from, I think it's 1 in 4 for men and 1 in 10 for, reverse that, 1 in 4 for women and 1 in 10 for men. When we hit 85, that's when that risk starts to increase significantly a lot. Speaking of turning off your phone, I did not do that. I was like, I knew this song.
Have you looked into head injuries and concussions and other toxins in the environment that are maybe causing?
There's
some of
definitely traumatic brain injury will increase your risk if we think about veterans. Anytime your brain is getting impacted or getting relieved of some of that oxygen, it may not be noticeable right away. Sometimes we've seen people that may have that temporary memory loss or cognitive function, but those repeated things that happen, just like healthy aging or lifestyle, will continue to age up. When we think about environment, raise your hand if you grew up here in Brunswick County. Nobody. Raise your hand if where you lived before it was cold. Clearly, environment has something to do with that. Your quality of air, your quality of water, being able to come to an environment where you have less stress, where the weather's warmer and you can get out and do more things. All of those things do have some sort of impact. There is a lot of studies going on specifically for pollution as a big one, so living in the bigger cities and the increased risk that's in that one too. But all of those environmental and lifestyle factors are the things that we can change or play a part in for minimizing our risk as much as we possibly can. Yes, ma'am.
You mentioned Mars twice. What is that?
Most of the time when I come here, they mention it, but it's in Wilmington, and it's memory assessment. I forget what it all stands for, but it's a group of neurologists and researchers through UNCW, and they specialize in this cognitive testing. So when we went through that evaluating memory and thinking problems, there are different types of cognitive tests. The family history, that's what they do. They specialize in that. So a lot of primary care physicians will refer you in this area to that place to be able to get that diagnosis, or to be able, sometimes different types of dementia have different outward symptoms. So they may, there's obviously Bruce Willis with FTD and frontotemporal lobe, Lewy bodies, which is what Robin Williams have. So even more if there's an opportunity that there could be something more than just Alzheimer's, or they will refer you to that to try to get a more accurate diagnosis, but it's a neurological diagnosis. Yes, sir.
For an individual living by himself, and he's getting into the stage of different dementia stage there, what are the biggest red flags that you would say would induce that person to want to go into where they say, I can't live by myself anymore?
One, isolation. Two, when we break down the task that somebody living at home needs the most help with, finances is actually number one. They may be at a point where they are missing bills or think that they can't afford to stay in there. And then going back to some of those basic tasks, remembering how to brush your teeth. It seems so simple. Go in the bathroom, wet your brush, take the toothpaste off, put it on there, brush it for 2 minutes. But that was like 4 steps that we just gave into, and then add that to daily bathing and things like that. There is, especially in those earlier moments, a self-awareness that there is something wrong, that you are missing things. So those could be a combination of any of that, but the graphs that we have broken down would be finances as the number one difficulty task, then those hygiene tasks that go into that, and then the loneliness or isolation part. Yes, ma'am.
So many people that have dementia will not take a shower. Why do so many people that have dementia will not take a shower?
There is so many multitudes of reasons for that. One, I already took one. I don't need to take another one. They don't have the memory. That memory is gone whether they took it or not. So it could be as simple as that. And there becomes a lot of changes that are happening in the brain with this. Could be a fear of going underneath the water. We've had a lot of people, if they're scared to take a shower because they need help, they may be, embarrassed that they need help. They don't want to accept help from those. There's a lot of things coming out where you can almost put a shower cap on and go like that to be able to wash someone's hair. We've had a lot of home aides that have worked with somebody. okay, I'll just help you bathe in your slip. I mean, as long as you're hitting those high points in there. But there's a variety of reasons for that. Why, you know, why am I scared of birds but not scared of spiders? I mean, those are just parts that are in our brain that relate to our personality, and there's no real right or wrong answer for that. It could be a multitude of things that are happening for them to not wanting to take the shower.
How about when they say, you'll say, you need to take a shower, and then they go crazy on you. They kick, they pull, you know, your hair, they just go crazy on you.
What's the trigger? Shower. You told them they have to shower. Whatever is causing them not to do it, you've just told them the word that they don't want. So try rephrasing it as saying, oh, we're going to go, so-and-so is coming over today. Let's get cleaned up. Just kind of changing your phrasing. But we all have different triggers in our regular life, whether with this diagnosis or not. So for some reason, and again, can't really say with definitive answer why showering is a trigger, but let's take that out of the equation. Let's change how we're talking about taking a shower. Let's talk about getting it cleaned up. Let's talk about looking our best. Some of those suggestions can sometimes help a little bit with that. Depending on who you're telling the person, maybe, I don't want you to see me naked, or we hire some inside help and the person that's coming in is a woman, and I've been married to my wife for 55 years. Why is this woman coming in here and just taking off my belt and expecting me to get in the shower? Lack of communication and those words to say, I'm uncomfortable, or you made this shower too hot or cold. I don't know how else to communicate with you, so I'm going to start throwing my arms and cursing and pulling at things because I don't know how to tell you I don't want to do this for whatever reason that is. So sometimes just changing the phrasing, kind of avoiding that trigger, and helping them get to a way where they can feel more comfortable doing it. Or even just going, well, guess maybe we need to use some wipes, getting those wipes to be able to get those effect. But sometimes that's just the trigger word, and without having those communication skills, we don't know what other way to communicate. And I don't like relating anything with Alzheimer's or dementia to babies or children, but without having those words to say how they feel, our body language says a lot more than anything else. I tell my 8-year-old to go and clean her room. Ugh, fine, Mom. Her words told me yes, but that body language and that attitude and tone tell me a whole different story. So all of those things come into play, and it's overwhelming for care partners to think about changing your communication and being able to meet them in the middle. But it typically will make the experience of getting a shower go better if we can try a couple things and see if that might help.
Did you have a question? How common is violence in people who have Alzheimer's? The reason I'm asking, when I was growing up in Washington, D.C., our next door neighbor, who had a great career in the Navy, he had Alzheimer's, and he would try to beat up his wife, and a couple of times my brother had to intervene. Is this a common occurrence?
Unfortunately, it is common. It's difficult to say how frequent or how common, because it could just sometimes be like a one-off episode, or it could be ongoing. There's one of the ladies that between the Area Agency on Aging and Lower Cape for Life Care that we worked with in Wilmington, and she spent 87 days in the hospital because nobody would take her because she was so violent and aggression and agitated. But our brain tells us different things. It tells us left foot, right foot, left foot, right foot. Oh, step up, pick myself up. We all have different personalities and preferences in there. And that part, that violence part, is somewhere, down in there. And then we have this ability, we lose our ability to know necessarily this is what we're supposed to do to check the box. So without really having those like constant PET scans or CT scans, you don't really know which parts of the brain are getting affected. That's why we will see some people that will say, oh, I'm lucky, mom just kind of sat there in the room and smiled quietly and didn't talk to anybody, and versus other people that have these uncontrollable, violent outbursts to be able to have. So some of that can go back to maybe minimizing some triggers, especially if we're a veteran living in DC. You ever hear the GFL truck go by in the morning and fire off? It'll scare, you know, sometimes those outside environmental noises or communications, or gosh, if you turn on the TV every day and you have that, those can all just be triggers that may be causing that. But there is a part of our brain that has decision making and impulsivity and violence and things that can be affected. It's common, but it's not always frequent, if that helps a little bit. It kind of varies from person to person, but it is common.
Are there any other questions? We're starting to get to the end of our time here. Anybody else? All right, let's give Brooke a big hand. Don't forget your evaluations. You can leave your evaluations right on your chairs, or if you have them, drop them off on your way out to the lovely lady in the back. Thank you. Hope to see you at the next session.